Thank you, Madam President. One of the goals of the district for the 2010-11 school year is to address the condition of the district's facilities and to ensure that our buildings are safe, secure, and function efficiently to support student learning. The board established a committee in September to get input from the community and staff on putting forth another bond that will provide the district with the means to address the health and safety, infrastructure, and space issues that are most important for the safety of our children and the preservation of our buildings. The district invited members of the community and staff to participate on the team with 3 Board of Education members and central administration. The first meeting was on September 30th, 2010. 55 people attended. As a group, the team reviewed and discussed the $123 million bond that was rejected by the community last February. We asked, what did we learn, what did we do differently, and where do we go from here? There was a general consensus that the bond was too much, and that if there was hope of getting a new bond passed, trust needed to be established between the district and the community, and that the scope of the project needed to be scaled down with a focus on health and safety issues and preservations of our buildings. The team established 3 subcommittees to research different areas and make recommendations to the board based on this research. The subcommittees were the Infrastructure Committee, the Public Information Committee, and the Space Committee. The CPR team met twice a month and visited all the schools so they could take tours and see firsthand the areas of concern. Tonight's presentation is the culmination of the work of the Community Partnership for Revitalization team. At this time, we have a participant from each of the committees who will talk about the work that was done. First, I would like to introduce Mr. Ron Jager from the Facilities team. I know, is Ron here yet? Ron was running over for a soccer game and we're a little ahead of schedule, so actually I'm going to start with Mr. Dick Tavano, okay, from the space team. He's going to go first and just give you a bit of history about his team's work, the process, what they discussed. And before we go forward, I just want to really recognize, we had about 55 community and staff members who came twice a month religiously, putting in a lot of time and effort and really delving into the facility studies that was provided with them, really looking into all different options and very painstakingly looking at how to save costs. And as well as be sure that we're looking at preserving the community's assets and providing proper learning environments for our kids. And as I said, there was a real focus on health and safety. And this committee did work tirelessly and is making a recommendation to the board this evening. Then the board will take that recommendation and they, of course, are going to deliberate and really look over things before any final determination is made or decision about what to bring forth for the community. Okay, at this time, Mr. Tavano. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Richard Tavano from Calverton, and I'm representing the CPR Space Committee this evening. Madam President, members of the board, the focus of this committee was the examination in each of 7 district school buildings for pupil and safety for both pupils and staff, restoration and maintenance, improvement and expansion of teaching space, cafeterias, gymnasiums, etc. Each area was examined for needs versus wants. The committee was peopled by members of the community, district teachers, district administrators, project engineers, and a member of the Board of Education. Projections of student enrollment were provided by district administration. Project engineering support was provided by BBS architects and engineers. Initially, each school was the subject of a meeting where the committee was provided with an engineering assessment of the physical state of the building. This included need, priority, and cost of replacement or repair. An extensive tour of the facility was provided by the school principal. Discussion of the information presented followed. As the meetings progressed, detailed layouts of the schools were presented and discussed. These layouts were modified based on the discussions and recommendations of the committee. The meetings continued over a period of several months where the designs continually improved. Detailed cost estimates were presented. Schools were revisited with emphasis on high school and middle school. Special emphasis was placed on the Roanoke Area Elementary School because of its age-related needs. The final design presents a realistic, cost-effective solution to bring the district schools to a safe, up-to-date state while providing a modern educational environment for now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pomona. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Christine Santini forward. She was part of our Public Information Committee.
Good evening. I was part of the Public Information team, and we started out sitting down and having really positive dialogue between about 20 members that discussed what we can do this time around to have a successful bond. There were quite a few elements that we agreed upon over the course of the meetings, and some of them I'd like to share with you. One of the items that we were in charge of was coming up with a name for the bond, and we decided on the Community Partnership for Revitalization with a play on words for CPR and the tagline, breathing new life into our schools. In addition, throughout the meetings, some of the things that we learned was this is just the beginning for our group. We have a lot of work going forward. The first step that we felt we really need to handle is to do further research. We've got some great input from all these meetings that we've had, but we really need to reach out to the community with some sort of survey. We've all agreed, we're not sure whether that's a telephone survey or a written survey, but just to see what are the community members looking for, what are we missing. We just want to make sure we're addressing everything. Moving forward, our plan is to have more of a grassroots campaign to work internally, work on the inside out, build up momentum with this bond, positive influences through the support staff, the folks that work in the bus garage, custodial staff, and once we have people on the inside saying positive things and saying, wow, this is what we need here, we'll move on to the outside. As far as external communications, there's a lot that needs to be accomplished. We need to address people's misbeliefs about our district. There's a lot of wonderful things going on here that we find there's people on the outside are really unaware of. And if we come up with some wonderful anecdotal information, success stories of college graduates that have gone on to Ivy League schools, excellent careers that they've built for themselves, if we come in and interview them and communicate with the public to show you can get an excellent education here. So those are things that we're working on. Another important issue is careful timing of bringing this bond to the public. We want to take advantage of low rates for a bond, but we have to be very careful with these economic times that we're in. We all agree that a lot of relationships need to be worked on. We need to build trust in the community and also get our local politicians on board and work together moving forward. The reason I chose the public information team is because of my professional background. I worked in corporate communications and public relations. I have a vested interest in seeing this bond through, as I have 2 kids in the district and I am a taxpayer, and I expect the most from the district. We plan to prepare our kids to compete on international levels, and the only way we're going to be able to do this is to give them proper facilities and tools to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jager from our infrastructure team ran here from the soccer field, and he's here tonight, and we really appreciate you being here, Mr. Jager.
Perfect timing. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Ron Jager. I have 2 children in the school district. Been here about 10 years, and I'm a real newbie, I guess, in considering how much time I've been here. I mean, that's what I find. There's people that have been here for much longer than I have, and I have conversations with folks that say, oh, well, I went to this school, you know, I don't need more space. But things have changed a lot, and I think the community's changed, and I think we're ready to provide this to our children. And I got involved when I first moved here with something I think was called the Planning and Space Committee, and they were talking about building a new high school up in Wading River and all different types of scenarios, and it never really got any traction. And I think this group really came together on a regular basis. There was a few snowstorms that didn't perturb anyone from coming, and I'm really excited about what was done. I got involved with the Buildings and Grounds or Facilities Committee, however you want to call it. And the reason I got involved was because I really had a vested interest in seeing the schools look more like a true campus of what you see on most modern day schools when you visit Long Island. I'm involved in soccer, involved in a lot of sports, and I travel to these schools, and it's depressing. It's depressing when you go to the other schools and say, why don't my children have that? Why can't they have that? And the architects, I think, did a fabulous job, provided us with a nice study of what was needed, and we went through it pretty comprehensively, and it was hard. It was very difficult to cut things, because everything, when you look around, you do a tour of the school, and I welcome anyone to do a tour of the school, you'll see it firsthand. I mean, there's lots of improvements that are needed. I mean, the maintenance committee, the maintenance group here has done a great job with the floors and certain things, but when the architects, or you read the study and they say how old things are, you're shocked. You're like, oh my God, it's really been here that long and it still looks like that. So I mean, the roofs need to be done, the cornices, the windows that are sealed shut because they're not operational. We took a good look at it, and we look at it from a health and safety concern. That was our biggest priority. But when you go through it, like I said, it was very difficult. Some things we were able to cut off, and we worked with Mark Finnerty and his group and said, over time, those things can be fixed. But a lot of it, that's where this money's going to go. I mean, most of this money is going to things that you would think when you're building your house, or even if you watch this old house, or any of those home improvement shows, those things need to be replaced. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no other way around it. The community needs to know that. And I think I know that, and I think anyone that was involved in this group or went on a tour knows that. So I'm hoping that this is a budget a bond that the community can accept, and they're going to fully adopt, like I have and everyone I talk to. I mean, I literally get to the point where if they don't want to hear what I'm saying, they don't see it, I just cut them out. They're just not part of my life anymore, because they need to open their eyes and realize what needs to be done here. And you're not talking about digging too deeply into your pocket. I mean, this is the best time for interest rates, best time for construction costs, best time for lots of things. And if we don't do it now, I think we're going to probably be sitting here years from now and say, why didn't we do it then? Like, why? What would really hold us back? I mean, this is really a good time to do it. So that's pretty much why I got involved, and I hope that everyone feels as passionate as I do, and we can get this thing moving and give what our children deserve, truthfully. Thank you.
At this time, we have a few members of the committee that came this evening for the presentation along with our presenters. So at this time, I'd like them all to stand. I see. Excuse me? Okay, Joe's going to present you with roses. And I'd like you to stand, please, and get me recognized. Administrators as well, anyone that participated on the committee, don't be shy. Ms. McKillop, I see you back there. Stand up. Mr. Gassar, Ms. Conroy. And also, would any of you like to add have any comments that you'd like to add? Mr. Lance, I see you back there. No? Okay, no one else feeling?
You're not giving me
Come on, Dave. Come on, Dave.
Thank you, we're all Thank you very much. And once again, it was really amazing how this committee came together. In the beginning, there was a lot of acrimony, and good acrimony. There was just a lot of bantering back and forth and discussion and a lot of different opinions about what we should be bringing forth, what should be done. But in the end, the committee really came together and worked as a team, each committee and then as an entire group. And I think it was really a positive process. And at this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Roger Smith from BBS, who's going to show the board and the community exactly what the recommendations are from the CPR committee. The process was that each time the committee and each group came up with revisions and recommendations, those were given to the architects who then went back and revised and brought them back again. And as I said, there were many, many meetings of discussions, of redoing things, of adding, of taking out, of really discussing what are needs versus wants, what can we put off into the future, what's non-negotiable that has to be put into it. So this is going to be a presentation. You'll see what the recommendations are for each of the buildings in our school. So Mr. Smith?
Thank you. I'm going to get rid of these because I'm so lost with this. If you noticed, I'm not sure. I'm going to just take the board through a general discussion. Kevin's going to take you building by building. The reason we have four slides or four screens is because if you were part of the committee, you got to see the four elementary schools at the same time. And we thought that made a big difference. One of the things that we did in the previous referendum or the previous projects when we presented, we showed one, and then you see the next one. You could never tell what happened with the one before. This lets you see what the thought process was from building to building to building, that there was a thread from the committee to make sure all four of those were treated equally and as importantly. I'm going to just do some of these major goals, and that way you can keep you moving. One of the major goals was to get rid of all your temporary classrooms, better known as modular space, and the word temporary doesn't fit them at all. Some of them have, I think they're not quite as old as me, but they've been around a pretty good time. And the committee said to itself, that was one of the things we want to do, provide permanent space. Permanent space. The middle school and the high school science rooms need to be renovated. Very important topic. There was also the need for more space in science at the high school, so it wasn't only renovated, it was renovate and add. So there was additional space required. Generally, I think the comment that was just made about the buildings is you're kind of like in where you are for a while. So when you walk into some of the spaces, you get a sense that things have kind of stayed the way they are. There's a general upgrade to many of the classroom spaces, instructional spaces that need to be upgraded and brought into the 21st century. That's also part of the theme of things to be accomplished. We were reconfiguring student drop-offs at a number of buildings, Phillips, Riley, Pulaski, and the middle school. There is a mass plan that we call it that's been developed that goes from the high school to middle school all the way down to Pulaski. And that's a complete re-look at how that property all takes place. We'll take you through that in a minute. Obviously, sidewalks and parking needed to be repaired. Safety surfaces, playground equipment, many things that have gone through disrepair over time. We also just heard about roofing. It is an issue. Just as a topic, we have roofs in the district that way surpass the 20-year expectancy of a roof. And I think that's, again, something that you need to look at and put the buildings out a period of time. Upgrading heating and ventilation systems, bringing fresh air into the structures. Single pane windows. Energy conservation is always something that we're looking at, especially with the renovations that you're considering. That gives us an opportunity to put dual pane in, specifically the middle school and high school. And then making sure that cafeterias made sense And you had kitchens available to those at some of the buildings where those don't all work. Okay, I'm going to let Kev take you through building by building.
Okay, if we could just advance to the site plans. Okay, the site plan diagrams here just showing at first the 4 K4 elementary schools. And we did it in such a way that we could show all 4 at the same time because they're in relative scale to one another. So that's how big they are compared to one another, site to site. This is your existing assets, your K4 buildings. Okay, next. The next series of slides show basically that the intent was to, obviously, with all the discussion of infrastructure, make sure to preserve the assets that you have, maximize the use of your assets that you own, and try to minimize the amount of new construction. So you can see on these diagrams that in the spaces, drawings where there's a little bit of blue going on, I don't know where it is, these are actually the only areas of additions at these 4 buildings. And the other key aspect of the site plans is that in the shaded gray area, you can see the expansion of the drop-off loops and parking spaces, in particular at Phillips and Riley. And also Aquabog has an additional, not quite making it that far, but on the far left of Aquabog, there's 30 additional parking stalls. So again, just existing to propose your site plans. Next. Okay, here you have a close-up view of your actual building plans. Again, they're all on the same scale. So you can compare the amount of yellow building to building, and that's how much space there is relative one to the other. We took a real close look at all of this in terms of the spaces that are there, sizes, dedicated spaces, support, instruction, core spaces, cafeterias, everything. Everything was looked at and analyzed, and basically inventoried. What do you have, and compared to where we're going. So that's the purpose of the existing plans. Next. So in keeping with the idea of infrastructure, these are some key highlights of this facility and infrastructure, or kind of interchangeable terms, that we felt that those 4 K4 buildings, these are some pretty key highlights as far as what's going on for the infrastructure. I don't know if I want to comment on that at all, but there's a much longer list to this, but we just figured we'd keep it to the kind of the top few.
I just want to say one thing. I forgot to say, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to reiterate that's something that I observed today. I was at field day for Riley. We had 1 grade level there and 50 cars parked right across the soccer field. We just don't have adequate parking. I mean, they park all over the street, all over the place. I just wanted to put that. I wanted to say it before I forgot.
And it's a major safety issue in terms of at all times of day when vehicles are coming and going and children are walking amongst them. Okay, so these are some of the highlights. Moving to spatial, which is, of course, the complement of the infrastructure. And this starts to lean towards what did we discuss in the space committee, as far as what would you do with your existing buildings to reconfigure or expand them or not expand them. So basically, starting at Aquabog, we'll just go across. We're building a new kitchen at Aquabog, so that it has a proper kitchen. At Phillips, the modulars will no longer be used for the K4 program. At Riley, we're adding 2 classrooms of new construction, and at Roanoke, we're adding a kindergarten wing, kindergarten classrooms, as well as new kitchen and cafeteria. And other things that go on, we've looked at all of the instructional space needed for the enrollment projections, spaces needed for instructional sections, spaces needed for support programs. It was all thoroughly discussed in committee, so that we know where we're heading with all that. We're creating the building program. I don't know if I need to go through all of them. They're here. We'll move on to
The board, do you need us to go each one? But I think it gives you a general feeling for building to building.
Board has both weeks.
Okay, great.
But it's nice to see it visual.
Okay, so here's the kind of the text version of the highlights, and then we do have the plans coming up next, which I will go through. The proposed plan diagrams. So here, basically, again, The color is a little different for each projector, but basically blue are additions, and the more greenish in the midst of the yellow are interior reconstruction. Of course, everything was based upon a program that was developed to meet the educational program needs for each building. Aquablock having its kitchen in the lower left-hand corner, and all other kind of hatched areas are really about making sure there are enough support spaces, making sure there's nobody in the basement anymore. Everyone's brought up upstairs. All the programs are accounted for, as well as K-4 and special education. At Phillips, there are no building additions. And at the same time, no K-4 students are in the modulars any longer. So based on the capacity of the building and projected enrollments, we were able to bring everybody into the building. And you'll see in a lot of cases where there's kind of a green area with some smaller spaces. When we had developed a list of support spaces with the committees, at times it was seen we could take existing spaces and subdivide to create the correct number of support spaces. So all of that is very specific to each building. In Phillips also, the library has expanded, kind of took over and kind of bumped part to the end there. Can't quite see it. And then, but next to the library is a computer room. So within Phillips and Riley, the libraries have been expanded internally. Taking us to Riley, we have 2 additional classrooms constructed here. And we also have a complete reconstruction of the existing cafetorium such that you would take away the existing stage, allow the cafetorium to take up all of that area and build a new stage. Basically turn the space 90 degrees. You can kind of see, and it's one of the reasons we did this in relative scale. You see at Aquabog, there are these size boxes that are kind of consistent with one another, and Riley just didn't have the cafetorium that it needed like others did. So we were able to accomplish that here at the stage. Again, other green reconstructed areas have to do with support space. And finally to Roanoke, you see all 4 levels together at once. And there's an addition to the back corner here, which starts at the lowest level with cafeteria and kitchen, and then continues as a kindergarten addition on 2nd and 3rd floor. The reason for kindergartens is they are one of the larger classrooms needed by an elementary school, and Roanoke just didn't have them. So we provided a new wing for them and also eliminated the use of modular classrooms. A bunch of other things happened here at Roanoke in terms of trying to keep the grade levels together. You know, we have multiple levels and classrooms all separated one from another. And in this case, we were able to keep, kindergarten pretty much together, adjacent, right above each other. First grade together in one section, 2nd grade together in another corner, next floor up, 3rd grade together, 4th grade together.
If I could just reinforce what I mentioned earlier to the board. If my little guy, or my grandson, is what I put that in there, was going to one of these schools, then I would be able to look at that school and say, I wonder what's happening at that one. Is that one different than any of the others? Is the spatial changes, are things being done to that building that's comparable to the others? And I think that allows you to look, and what Kevin was pointing out before, is we truly have looked at each one of them individually, but in their whole too. So that's nothing really missing at the moment, which it could have.
Kevin, would you also explain how the elevator plays into that extension?
Absolutely. In the Roanoke plan here, basically you have 4 floor plans, but you have 5 levels because the ground is at one level and the first floor is a little bit higher. So in this case, we wanted to make sure that we could put this little X, I don't know if you can see it, but obviously it's right by the chimney, the existing chimney in each plan. It connects all 5 levels of Roanoke. And this is really the only location physically around the building that can accomplish that in one shot. So as you look at the first floor, there's the new main entrance from the parking lot. Parking lot is over to the right, into an area and up a few steps to the first floor. The elevator allows you in and up to the main level, and now the new main office is right there to receive you. Moving to the 2nd floor, well, let me go down to the basic first. So you're on the first floor. Downstairs, you have the gymnasium, which has not been accessible. Because we're building right next to it, we're able to pull the elevator down to the same level as the gymnasium and work our way across and provide accessibility from the elevator through to the gym. As a product of doing this addition, it granted us the opportunity to really do it cleanly once. Second floor, again, the elevator connects and provides accessibility for the entire building, and same on the third floor, always in the same location at each floor.
I just asked you a question at Rono, where the upstairs, the balcony is. Are you closing that off? You know, they had chairs that you could watch the programs.
Yeah,
Is that going to be closed off?
it's still going to remain for use. It's not going to be closed off.
Is it going to be that people can sit there to watch a show, or are they going to use it for supplies? Because
For cultural.
the thought was that they couldn't sit there because it was dangerous, but I don't think it's not, I don't know if it was dangerous, but they had it closed off and made like little spots for office supplies and stuff.
Needed egress, access and exit, and that is part of the plan, so it's
Because that's a beautiful auditorium. And
I
in
can speak to that, too.
1990, the kids' house up there, and it's absolutely, it's beautiful. It'd be a shame to not utilize it. That would be my question. I'd like to see, if it has to be an egress, as our superintendent said, I'd like to see an egress, because I think it's really very nice. I mean, to watch shows there, I mean, it's beautiful.
At some time in the past, as the space was closed by one of the firemen, local fire marshals, but there was a concern of people just with the balcony front railing. It is low, but it meets code. That's proper and appropriate for a railing, even in today's code, much less 1923. And the idea is when you're seated, you're able to view the stage appropriately. And there is actually a higher section of railing where the stair sections come down and make those areas safer. Part of the problem was all of the exits went into a common hallway, so it was all into one smoke zone. But we've created a solution to correct that issue by adding a set of cross-corridor smoke doors, providing two separate exits out of the space, thereby making it a safer exiting condition and current to today's code. So the intent is to restore that as a functional and usable space, and all the stored materials should really come out of it. And by adding to the building, we're providing additional spaces to restore stuff.
I just had one other question about Rono. When you're going to get an elevator, I know I'm jumping the gun, but what brand are we getting? Are we going to get an Otis elevator? You know, there's nothing better than an Otis elevator. The other elevators, I mean, there's a German, they're just so slow. You need, it really, and time is essence. You don't want it to be hopping along, going up and down. So really, an Otis elevator is the fastest elevator, and it's a great elevator. So I'm hoping that that's what the builders are going to put in, is an Otis elevator. I'm serious on that one. Have you ever been in an Otis elevator?
Sure. Yes, we have. But as you know, we're bound by the bidding and the equivalency.
Can you have a bid for an Otis elevator?
Yes, we can't preclude the contractor from bidding an equivalent if that's submitted. So, and Otis tends to stay in Manhattan. And we used to have Dover on Long Island, but they have.
Well, I know a friend that maybe we can do business with. I bet we can get from Manhattan to come out here. I mean, he's in the Otis elevator business. He's now moved to New Jersey, so maybe, I mean, many years ago, that's what they talked about, even 20 years ago, is putting in an Otis elevator.
I have some questions on Wiley, where we have the most urgent spatial needs. I'm looking at this proposal. You've expanded the library and the computer room and sacrificed a third grade room. And then I see the two reading rooms that have been divided down on the bottom in the green section. And you've sacrificed a second grade room and you've added two classrooms. Now, looking at it, to me, we haven't gained any classroom space in a school that is absolutely maxed out. Can you please elaborate on that?
Sure. This plan here is has the same number of instructional sections as currently exist in Riley. The enrollment projections, and we're basing it on the demographic report, is that the enrollment will decrease. So when we plan for the instructional spaces, we look at the highest projected peak enrollment for the 10-year period of the demographic study. We target that with the number of instructional spaces.
So
At
it's-
one time,
A calculated guess as to where we're going to be. It's a calculated guess as to where we're going to be.
it's based purely on the demographic projections, the numbers.
The elementary sort of peak out in the 2011, 2012 school year.
And if they don't, we're right back where we started.
Well, the fallback position shouldn't be necessary, and again, I mean, there's still a classroom in here. It's just a matter of reconfiguring support at that point if it should be necessary without additional construction. Yeah, there is a little bit of room in terms of the capacity. Let me find that for you. The capacity of the proposed Riley is 715 students. Capacity, if it was fully maxed out, all sections were full capacity all at one time. And the projected peak enrollment is 670. So there's additional space in the sense of capacity and percentage of another 100 students to full capacity, full utilization of all the space.
With what modifications? We're swapping classrooms for classrooms. I don't see any increase in spatial, classroom space. There's no increase in space, in maybe a couple of hundred square feet. You've got the blue section with 2 new classrooms, but you're sacrificing 2 classrooms to reconfigure.
It's true that
Nancy, what is our enrollment at Riley right now? About 640? And what did you say would be, where would it be with the renovations?
the projection is, the enrollment projection is 607.
607.
The capacity,
Right.
which is both existing and proposed,
Right.
is 715. The difference, one important, very important difference, even with the same number of sections, is there's an additional kindergarten section given in this proposal than exists now, because the math breaks out of the sections and then they break at the class size policy into another section or not. When you break out the sections, in the current building plan, if you were to fill up all the kindergartens that exist, there would be 125 students. If you divided the enrollment by the exact same for each grade level, it'd be a little more than that, so it's really tight. In the proposal, there's an additional kindergarten section to allow kindergarten classroom, to allow those sections to remain under the 25.
And when they go to first grade, what happens?
Then in this plan, what they did, the 2 additional classrooms into the building, once everything got reconfigured, are intended to allow grades 1 through 3, or potentially 4, especially 1 through 3 though, because their class size policy is less than 4. If one of those grade levels should break into an additional section in a given year, they get that one of those 2 classrooms. If all 3 sections, all 3 grade levels, all break the section, yes, there's one short.
There's a problem.
Okay, and 4th grade allows more students in each classroom per class policy, so it's not foreseen.
So we're looking at increased class sizes to comply with the spatial needs.
Right. So, and in the
Which every parent does not want.
What is the benefit of dividing grade 2 and 14 to 2 reading rooms and not keeping it as one big reading room in case we have to transfer it back to a classroom?
It simply allows for 2 separate, sound isolated, private spaces. And that's what the plan is at this point, to allow that to happen. Should it not be desired for that wall to be built there and let it be an open classroom that can be subdivided with partitions or whatever, that could be done also. The approach to all of this, to be consistent and fair building to building, was to say, let's provide an individual space for each support in the program. Each support program has a room. If there are 4 reading
consider making those a retractable partition, for flexibility. In several of those, that's beneficial.
Yeah, okay. Let's move to, we're going to leave the K4 environment and move to Pulaski. Okay, here, since we just have one building at a time now, we'll use all 4 screens. Here you have the existing plan diagrams for Pulaski, starting with partial site plan to the left, first and second floor, and then along with the existing plans, some highlights of facility or infrastructure projects that we're to undertake. Again, your existing assets are here. You can see that the second floor, for anybody who's been in the building, you know there's a lot of open space. It looks very monumental from the outside, but actually it's very much open in the center. You have existing modular classrooms that are being used for some programs, annex here. And really what's missing from the building are perhaps an appropriately sized kitchen and cafeteria, which leads us to the proposed plans. Again, you can see with the hatching, look at the first floor, we've added a cafeteria and kitchen with support toilet facilities for that, plus ability for people from outside to come and use those toilets. With the site plan, you can see there's been some, my pointer's not quite working, but you can see that there's a slightly different parking configuration. And moving through the building, first floor, yeah, that'll work. And when the existing cafeteria and kitchen are vacated to move into the new kitchen and cafeteria, you can see some green spaces towards the center of the first floor. Those become able to be used for instructional or support spaces. Because of the work that was done in what were once light wells to now be courtyards and have true 2 means of egress, we're able to have classrooms face into the courtyards now so that they can be used as second means of egress. And corridors have been provided in order to let people get out should they need to in an emergency. So there's been an opportunity to create some classrooms in here. It's also based on the amount of children expected to be here, we had to increase the number of instructional sections in the building. And to do that, really we reclaimed all those internally. We did not build any new classrooms. Again, by moving the cafeteria, you gain some instructional space. By taking over some of teen locker areas in this case, that's 2 additional classrooms. This whole area here where the annex connects to the existing building is not handicapped accessible at the moment to traverse the staircase down to the annex. So this whole effort here in the middle there. Yeah, but the effort there is to provide a chairlift to go around, a pathway around the existing staircase. The existing staircase has to stay there, and allows handicap access down to the annex level. By doing that, we had to do that, of course, to allow accessibility to the cafeteria, which every student will have to use. And while we had that opportunity, we made a larger music room, and we moved the health room in. Music was very much crunched for space. There are still music spaces immediately adjacent to the stage for support and use of the stage for music programs, as well as now a new music room here. Again, now second floor, up on the back facing the fields, there's an existing wrestling space at the moment that is only accessible from the 2 stairwells that go up to it from the first floor. You can't get there from the building. So what's been done here is to provide a corridor access from the second floor corridor to allow now accessibility, which once you're off into the main corridor, you can use the elevator. So that this space is now accessible. And again, the same idea applies, that we reclaimed some larger classroom spaces because of the ability for the courtyards as being true courtyards now to provide second means of egress.
Is there a minimum on new classroom space that's designated by state ed?
Yes, there is. There are guidelines set, in this case for 5-6, a general classroom should be 770 square feet. It should have 2 means of egress. It should
Then when we do a renovation on the team rooms that are up there, and we change those to classrooms, and we go from 759 square foot team rooms to 601 square foot classrooms, are we out of compliance still?
No, because the next part is grades 1 through 6 can have 550s.
550s?
Yes.
So those 1 through 6 can be 550s.
Yeah.
610, no.
What we did at the point in terms of understanding the capacity of this building with this new plan, you apply a square foot per student for each space. So for K-6 elementary school would be, it's actually 28.5 square feet per student. So what we've done to say is, well, if you have a 600 square foot space, and this happens with a lot of older buildings, you would limit the number of children in that space so that it's not overcrowded due to this.
If we were building new space, we would be brand new space. State ed would look at that and say, why isn't it 770? Why isn't it 900? We have an old building like this, they recognize.
They're a little flexible.
Yeah, they recognize that you've got irregulars. You've got things that aren't quite right sized, and they allow that to continue, recognizing that you have to go out the back wall to gain the extra 150 square feet.
Okay.
What Ken's throwing out too is that number, and you hit it right on. You take a square foot per student, you put it into that space, and that's what it should operate as.
All right, gotcha. Gotcha, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's Pulaski. Okay, moving to the middle school. Existing plans. Existing site, as you know, pretty self-explanatory. First floor plan, second from the left. Yellow existing space. All of the modular spaces have not been hatched in yellow because the idea is to not use them anymore. And as we move to the proposal, you'll see them all go away. The existing building, once you get to the second floor, you realize there are 3 blocks of yellow floating all by themselves. So each of the 3 wings is a dead end vertically, and they don't connect to the second floor. So that's really been an issue in terms of how students can move, et cetera, and there haven't been separate elevators for each wing also, which is going to be provided in other funding. But as part of this overall project of the building, the circulation patterns and accessibility will all be addressed. Basically, and again, this is your existing asset. The facility or infrastructure items are extensive here, including full new roof, full new windows, and a lot of attention paid also to the site in terms of parking loops, especially for drop-off and pickup for buses, and many other things. There's just some highlights here. Just move to the proposed. There's a half step to the proposed, and that is directly related to the fact that 6 of the existing modular buildings are being used for instructional space, and the whole move here is to take those 6 temporary classrooms and permanently put them into the proposed plan. The modulars go away, but you didn't lose the instructional spaces to when the program exists currently. So at the end of this, there will be as many instructional spaces as you currently use using modules. Really, this is just showing in the plan because there's a lot of discussion in the committee. Well, where are those 6 rooms? How does this work? Because a lot of things are moving around, and this just distilled out where the 6 rooms come from. We're also, you have existing art rooms, home and careers, very much all over the building, completely separated from one another. An art room on the 2nd floor in an isolated wing. Home and careers not even close to each other. So as part of what you'll see in the proposed plan coming up, we try to gather up all the specials into an area of the building to allow them to function better in groupings and use the existing spaces for instructional space. So we just move to the next. you'll see the proposed. The little purple dots here are really, I was talking about elevators being provided in each of the 3 wings. That's being funded separately outside of this proposal, but those have been coordinated with this effort. Again, blue is new construction. So you have a new piece here. One of the first things this does is it connects. Anybody's been in the building, these are now corridors. There's a figure 8 that you can go here, instead of having only one way to get back to all of these functions. So part of it is making sure we meet the program needs. And then also, since we have something to work with, can we improve other aspects of the building, like building conditions for the students? What we've done here too is the existing cafeteria, same as at Riley. Take out the existing stage, make that all cafeteria, build a new stage. So the new stage is in the addition, as well as 3 additional classrooms, a new music ensemble room, and a new art room, appropriately sized. The library would be renovated. The 8th grade science rooms would be completely renovated. It was determined, and all along in these discussions, what can we not do and it'll still be okay to the program? It was decided through discussion that the 7th grade science rooms are okay. They're adequate for the 7th grade program. We don't have to fully renovate them. Home and careers moved to the upper part of the plan. I can't quite point to it. There are existing 2 technology rooms there. And it was decided, well, really 1 technology room would suffice. So instead of making more blue and more new construction, we were able to fit the 2 new home and careers rooms within existing space. So again, trying to minimize the amount of new construction as much as possible. Second floor, there's really not a whole lot going on except some changes of labels, because the art room left and the home and careers room left, and allowed those really spaces that are sized for general instruction to be general instruction. It's a lot of right sizing. So again, to summarize, I think I touched on most of that here in terms of the spatial, in terms of the benefits of the plan.
Can I just ask a question before you move on to the high school? Just getting back to Roanoke, when you're going to expand a little bit, put the classrooms in and stuff, we're allowed to, because other bonds, when we wanted to expand and not bring the portables into Roanoke Avenue School, they said that the state said that by the children, by the square footage, and there wasn't enough, it wasn't allowed by the state. So have you taken that into consideration? That was at that time, we wanted to add on to Roanoke, and it said, because of the kids and the building size, and there's not that many acres there, and we couldn't expand.
Well, 2 things. In terms of acreage, it's a small site, so there's a site variance even for operating now. So that would prohibit you from operating. And in terms of the other maximum expense, that's based on a couple variables of the amount of students, the number of instructional spaces, and the building aid that would generate.
Let me say, I'm going to assume that you might at that time been thinking about putting additional classrooms on for more kids at the building, to absorb more kids, potentially.
No, it wasn't that many more. I don't think there was a lot of classrooms.
What State Ed would say to you is, right now it's too small a site for the number of students on the property. That's a fact. That's the way it works. That's why I kept saying it's an existing variance. When we go back and do any work to that, we kind of reopen the game again. And yes, we have taken that into account. We know that the state has to give you the variance again. The only way out of that is to have more land acquisition for it, or a different property, and that's not going to happen. They'll re-grant the variance, but if you were all of a sudden, just for any reason, there was some configuration taking place and you wanted to add 50 children to that building, State Ed would say, no. You already have what you have, that's what it is. I have a feeling there was a crossover someplace in the past, but we're fine. We're okay. We have taken it into account. We know what the state will do.
It's not unusual also. There's schools in that type of situation throughout the island. It's an urban
Beautiful
setting.
school. I like it. I just have another question. Roanoke, and I guess part of, philosophy is also brick, but have you taken into consideration about repointing the brick after we do some of the work at Roanoke Avenue so that we don't have, when the rains come and the waters don't come in? Is that going to be a part of this bond, the repointing of the bricks? I mean, it's supposed to be done, they told us every 5-6 years, even if it's done every 10 years, I think it's probably time that it needs to be repointed and taken care of, so that we can take care of the inside.
There is exterior components to all of the buildings. There is pointing work to be done at Roanoke. We did just do it a couple of years ago as part of the $10 million fund, but we will be doing additional work again in this scope here. Buildings of that age do need continual maintenance of the basement. And Pulaski as well.
Really well.
Speaking of Roanoke, was all these schools, you said, going with needs more than one, were all the principals brought in to speak to them and see, their needs?
So, we had an elementary principal on the committee, Allison Conroy from Pulaski was actually on the space committee. We had Andrew Kekar, middle school on the committee, and we had Mr. Rex on the committee, Mr. Sarnes, Meyer, high school.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is because we're talking about Roanoke, and I see rooms designated, 2 for ESL, 4 for reading, 1 for resource, 1 for literary coaching, 1 for speech, 1 for psychologist, and 1 for social work. These are all designated as needs.
That was all done through the space section.
That was all done through the space committee, okay, from looking at each building and the existing programs in the building. Dr. Edsel facilitated that committee, knowing what programs were in each building. As well, we did a presentation in each building, as you're aware, and we had the building principals speak about what the concerns were in their specific building. So this was done based on the existing programs that are in the building.
There was also consensus on the number of support spaces that were necessary for each of the elementaries by all of the elementary principals and joint committees.
We're on to high school? Okay. All right, here you go. Okay, again, starting with existing and infrastructure, your existing high school and that part of the site that it occupies, mostly by building here. Your existing building of most of your classrooms, densely packed in the front, a 2-story structure, and in the back are all your larger core spaces, cafeteria, auditorium, gymnasium, etc. Main entrance, etc., as you know here. And then the second floor with mostly science and some other classes in classrooms there in between, and solid cores in the middle of each wing. In terms of the infrastructure, again, as at the middle school, full roof replacement, full window and window wall replacement, and attention to paving and parking and bus areas, capital upgrades throughout ADA to make sure everything is accommodated, full locker replacement, and any other items. These just being some highlights. We move to the proposed. What really is happening here in a general sense, again, as with every building, we're trying to maximize using what you already have. Perhaps rethinking it, trying to reuse it a little bit differently. Can we do different things with space than has been done before, always in an effort to build less. In the case of the high school, most all major areas have been addressed of the program. You have expanded and improved science, expanded and improved music, expanded and improved physical education. The library has been revisited. Main entrance to the building, guidance, and main office have been revisited. Support spaces throughout. Art program has been centralized. And I can go through that quickly here in terms of what's happened. Of course, in the front of the building is a 2-story addition. which is comprised in the first level of a new main entrance, guidance and main office. As we kept going through the program requirements, we were balancing existing space versus new. And as this addition kept developing, it at first had only one point of connection to the building earlier in the process. And as the space committee kept meeting and discussing, it came from the committee that really it should connect twice to the building and really help with the internal circulation of the building. Once you touch over here, you've taken out the main entrance. Brings other issues in terms of you need a good control point to the building. Main office and guidance can be effectively put in a new addition efficiently, and existing space can be subdivided into classroom space and support space, perhaps more efficiently and compactly in that green area than it could have been here in Real in this case. The existing library right now has a mezzanine open to an open space to the second floor. That mezzanine has been proposed to be infilled so that on the second floor you can have 3 proper instructional spaces above the library. To allow the library not to have lost any space, it's really not using the mezzanine anyway, but it has reclaimed some contiguous space on the first floor, some support spaces that are in what used to be the library's conference room. They've been pulled out of there so the library can have a conference room again and function as a library should. There's been a lot of kind of introduction of space and pulling spaces through the building to reconfigure. All right, so I've covered that. The art program is here in the middle of the building in the back. What was an art studio back here, kind of by itself, has been brought into the fold. All art rooms are together. What was Home and Careers is now been located across the hall to an area that is designated not to be needed as much as a commons, perhaps, and we make that an instructional space. Home and Careers now adjacent to all of the functions of the cafeteria, kitchen, etc. The music program, back here are a couple of rooms currently. Originally, we had a music edition, and through continued conversation, how can we cut, eventually realized, well, there are high ceilings back here enough, we could recapture existing real estate and make a very functional, large music ensemble space that is missing in the building now, and then renovate the other music spaces in place. There's an additional PE station over here, which used to exist over here. The weight room is in the back corner now. It will be located over here adjacent to all the PE facilities. So again, you have programs being centralized to each other. On the second floor, you have your existing science rooms, which should all be renovated. Science research, which right now is a very tiny room, would have an appropriately sized space, which is a benefit of having infilled mezzanine, existing space. And out front, you have 4 lecture-led science rooms for advanced science to be added to the science program for those sciences that would require more space. Everything else would be renovated. I think I pretty much called out everything that's here as the highlight. I haven't missed anything, but really it's about collecting the departments of building together, maximizing the amount of instructional space and dedicated space within the existing building, and only building new what was needed to fill out the program and not use the modular classrooms anymore.
Can I just ask you a question? We're talking about you're taking out the existing modulars. Are you taking out these, the newest ones that were over here? The newest ones that were put?
No, just the
outside
north,
the,
just the 3 on the north
Okay.
would go.
You're not taking out this here. Any, are you going to do any kind of road work so that it's not going to be like a Lake George out there, so the kids, when it rains, that, we don't need a little boat to go back and forth? I mean, is that going to be rectified when you're doing this, work? To these portables here?
Well, no, the students wouldn't be in those modulars any longer.
They're not going to be in those modules, the brand new ones?
I mean,
The brand new ones? The ones that we just put up a few years ago?
we're not building a corridor out
They're
to.
taking them out?
Not taking them out, we're
Just saying.
looking at relocating administrative space from the middle school portables, the PPS spaces.
Oh, okay. So
Need a
it's
place to go,
just
since we
that
took the really old portables out, we're gonna reuse those potentially for that and some other functions.
Yeah, we're not building an enclosed corridor to modulars.
I just had one other question. What's the difference between raw cost and projected cost?
Raw cost versus project cost. Project cost includes all of the contingencies, fees, soft costs, legal, and a construction cost doesn't have any of that in it.
If I could just throw something else in here too. It's been explained, but a simple sense of clarity is that those blue boxes are how much more new space is required. Whatever goes in those, we need that much more space. When we designed one of the transitional designs with the committee, we had educational spaces in that front wing. And we reevaluated it and said, the last thing we want to do is have somebody come to the building and bypass kids to get back into the main portion of the building, to the main office. So the addition is not to create guidance, it's to create the space you need. What we were able to do is pull main office and guidance out of where they are. So the green box behind them is the filler. That was, we lost one to the other. That's all it is. But it puts everything back out front where it needs to be for security purposes and makes sense when someone's coming to the building and approaching it. I think that made a big difference in this design to make it acceptable to us and to everyone who's looking at it.
Just another point of clarification for the idea of roof replacement, partial versus full. In some of the elementary buildings, the older parts of the building haven't been replaced yet. That's what partial means. It's not just half the roof. There were additions done that weren't that old, that are still under warranty.
Could you explain the parking in the front of the building, I guess that was the west side of the building there? Where did that parking go to as far as faculty versus students?
Okay, we were asked to add 81 stalls to the property. So what we did was we left the back parking lot alone.
So it's intact.
It's all intact. And then we, right, in tandem with the development of the addition, we were able to put in the appropriate number of stalls to have that increase of parking. So really, when we added a few stalls in between the modulars and the building, added a kind of double loaded along the back of the stage, etc., to accommodate that count. And there is still a division between the front and the back.
It's not connected through.
Right, in terms of there's a front loop for drop-off in front that has just curbing here so that there's not an obstruction of parking. So that could be buses pulling and dropping off. And then there's the ability, again, always as driving around as parking. And then you simply infilled the stalls to meet the requested amount.
I'm just going to say one thing about this proposal, and I'm probably not the only one on this board that feels this way, but I'm the one that's going to say it. With the exception of the weight room being shifted from one side of the school to the other, this is sorely lacking. You've added classroom space, you've added cafeterias, you've made room for everything here for more children except for athletics. I see not a dime spent on athletics, and I'm very disappointed in that fact. The last plan had some major modifications to our facilities. When you travel to other schools and look at what they've done from the outside, the first impression you get of that district is what you're looking at in their facilities when you travel to sports events. And this does not address one thing. And when you make increases in space everywhere else, and you lack space for the students in athletics, I don't know where you will put all these extra kids when you keep that portion of the facility the same.
I'd just like to respond partially to that. This is a recommendation of a committee, okay, that convened, and they made recommendations to the architects. So this is only a recommendation to the Board of Education to deliberate. One of the major concerns of the people that participated was cost. And the focus was, you know, academics and students first, but looking at, you know, the overall, we invited coaches in to participate and talk, and different teachers when it had to do with their buildings. But this is the committee, you know, that convened with all of these people making recommendations after a lot of talk and discussion. It was very difficult cutting across the board. Getting from the 123 to see where we're at now, and it was, you know, it's a very difficult process to say what is it. You know, there are people on the committee that still feel the bond is too high. So
Well, it's got to be a balance of mind, body, and soul. And if you go out and exercise, and you come back to school the next day, you're going to do better academically. And you can't cut that out of the equation. Everybody knows when you get proper exercise, you feel better. Okay? And there's too many kids that aren't active enough now. And to not provide for that portion of the overall education experience, I think is, you know, something that we have to take a look at.
Are you talking about interior building space or field space?
I'm talking about John Rossetti having to practice basketball at 7:30 at night, start practice for his varsity team, and end up at 9:30 when these kids should be home studying. And that's just one small example. I'm sure Mr. Meyer or Mr. Polisi would come up with other situations that are the same.
Yeah, as Ms. Carney said, I understand this is just a proposal. I do understand what Mr. Griffin said. I do know Coach Rossetti does have late practices because there is a lack of interior gym space. There is, as kids start getting more involved with things, we start spilling over, like off-season, there's still other sports practicing, and one thing that we've been lacking for many years is indoor gym space. So I hope that once we do sit down as the board and take a look at all this, and I'm sure we're going to set up work sessions or whatever, that we're going to consider all that for indoor and outdoor space, because none of that's really kind of been touched on.
And I think, just so we're aware, that the next piece of this, okay, is for the board to do just what they began tonight, and is to start deliberating and talking about what was brought forth from the committee, and talking about how they want to revise and where they want to go from there. And in that light, we did set another tentative board meeting for June 7th, where the board could actually start really looking at what the committee presented and start those deliberations and discussions, which is the next piece that we're going. Part of those discussions, of course, have to be done based on, well, what is this going to cost us? And so we did get some preliminary numbers here so that you could see the overall cost of what was just proposed here to the Board of Education this evening was $78.4 million. And as I said, there was a lot of discussion back and forth with the committee about what it is that we think we could bring forth to the taxpayers that they would support, knowing that the prior bond was defeated quite significantly. So the committee did work very hard on having discussions about, and really tried to include a lot of people on bringing forth something, so we do commend them. We base these projections, as you know, we passed a repair reserve fund, and that is put in place for the fact that if the bond doesn't pass, or if the bond does pass and it doesn't get started, it's still going to be 2 years down the road before you put ground in, before work gets done. If there's any emergency situations, especially because of the age of our roofs and things, that money is there. But then if we don't need to use that, we can take that money out and reduce the bond and say get a middle school roof replaced or something. So we'd be able to take that out of the 75 million, out of the 78.4 with this proposal. So what we did was really looked at what's the sense of what a bond of this number would cost for taxpayers. And we looked at the interest rates at the times the bonds are sold, the length of the bond, which could be 15, 20, or 30 years, the state aid formula at the time of the projected approval, the percentage of the project that's aidable, the assessed valuation of the sections of the district at the time the bonds are paid, the state equalization rate of the 3 towns at the time the bonds are paid, and the assessed valuation of individual home. And these estimated costs right now are based on an estimated interest rates of 4, 4.5, and 5% for 20-year bonds, and based on $15 million in 2013 and $20 million yearly in 2014, 15, and 16. And the current rate, so you're aware, is actually less than 4%. So these estimates are on probably a little on the high side. Our current state aid for Riverhead is 29.6% for approved projects, with an estimated 85% of the project aidable. And the tentative assessed valuation established May 1st, 2011 for the towns, and the change in final state aid equalization rate obviously could shift the cost each year. So we only had the numbers for the town of Riverhead right now, so we just did an estimated cost for the average home in Riverhead with the full valuation of $276,588. This would average about $185.15 per year over the life of the bonds, and the range would obviously change from starting at about 39.47 in 2014 and peak up in 2018 to about 210.48, and that's per year. And to keep in mind, this if a bond was passed at some point early next year, it won't impact the tax rate or levy in 2011-12 or 12 and 13. But this was just to give you, the board, a sense of numbers here. So what we're talking about when we're looking at costs for taxpayers. So I know as you're deliberating, we're going to be able to get more numbers available for you. One of the things we're committed to doing with bringing forth this bond is really being able to address the needs of every individual homeowner. So that a homeowner, once a bond is prepared, could call up the district office and find out exactly what it's going to cost for that individual homeowner in each of the 3 townships. Yes.
I just have one question, a couple questions. One, I noticed in some schools there was grease traps, the amount was listed. Other schools, they didn't have the grease traps in the kitchens. So I don't know if that was an omittance or whatever when I was going through. Like Roanoke didn't have grease traps. There's 2 schools that did, a couple schools didn't, and that was one of my questions. And my most important question is, I know we're not there yet for the bond, but because you're our builders and our construction person, I'd like to see that this board be really fiscally responsible and put in a clause with our legal attorney that the work has to be done by a certain time. And if it's not done by a certain time, there's a penalty. They need to pay the penalty. We need to have, I guess it's called like how long would be the shakedown time and what is the duration for the problem so that the board doesn't get stuck with change of work orders all the time. We need this time. I don't think the board has ever done that. We need to put a penalty clause in it if the work isn't done by a certain time. And if it's done on or before, maybe there should be a clause for being on time, a little tiny bonus or something, because this sometimes it drags on and drags on and drags on, and the board has never done that for all other little mini bonds. But that's something that we should look into and see how much that's going to cost us in the one projected cost.
Yeah, if I could just address the grease trap item. What you would have seen was that Aquabog building has a grease trap in the infrastructure components because when the preparation kitchen was added, there wasn't one provided at the time. Now that we're moving towards full cooking back in the facility, we need to expand the sanitary system and incorporate a grease trap. Okay. At Roanoke, that would be bound into the overall cost of the building addition as part of the cafeteria and kitchen construction, so that there will be a whole new sanitary system associated with the addition. It's not just individually listed as a grease trap for that addition specifically. Phillips has grease traps in the kitchens. And well, it's probably just an improvement because we're reopening the kitchen. And the existing facilities that had full cooking kitchens have grease traps, but they're old and they need to be serviced in instances.
We're gonna put in three, we're gonna be by state, gonna have the sinks with the three,
Three compartment
receptions.
sinks.
The three compartments, sinks.
Yeah. The kitchens, this summer, we actually just, as you know, you just awarded kitchen renovations at the middle school, high school, Phillips and Riley contracts from the prior $10 million capital reserve project are being implemented this summer. And at Pulaski and at Aquabog, those were put on hold from the capital reserve to coordinate with the work being done as part of this bond.
I'd just like to make sure, Madam President, that I know I'm going off the board, but I would like to make sure that for the cost of the taxpayer, that we do take pride and make sure that we can get something in there legally, that the job has to be done on time, on or before, and not be dragged out and have lots of change orders. Because sometimes that does happen. And that again, would just take away from other things, and then the cost would just escalate. So that's what I'd like to see this board be prudent and be fiscally responsible.
I think that's already figured in, is it not, Roger? Or, right? Yeah, there are none? There are.
And I guess I'm a construction guy, so I'll chime in here. But I would gladly welcome a clause that carries a bounty or reward and reward for completion.
They're in Hingham Smith District. So you have, your attorney has them built into the general conditions?
And
Yes.
I would like to add that we have never failed to complete a project on schedule or well within budget, any of those projects with BBS. And I can't think of any exception where we haven't returned substantial savings to the district.
Thank you.
Nancy, I'd like to say, over the weekend, I went over this binder almost like 4 hours a day. And it's extremely obvious that a ton of time and dedication went into this proposal. And I'd really like to thank the CPR committee, BBS, and the administration and board members who did show up week after week to present this to us. It is extremely obvious that a lot of thought went into this, and I really thank them for all their hard work.
Thank you for that. It really was a pleasure working with the CPR team, and now, as I said, we're at the point where it's up to the board to deliberate and make any revisions necessary. And then once that is done and the board determines where we're going forward, we will be working with the CPR team again in that public information aspect as we look about how to get the word out. So I thank all of you very much for being here this evening, BBS, Mr. Nick, where are you over there? Okay, thank you for being here this evening, and we really appreciate all the time and effort once again. Thank you.
Thank you.